Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick unboxing and first look at the Sony Duo 13. Now this is in addition to the Duo lineup, a larger model. I did share the 11 with all of you last year, and in my opinion that still does represent one of the best hybrid Windows 8 experiences, giving you the best of both worlds, being a tablet as well as a laptop. Granted, it was cramped for many users with larger hands. That's something the 13 improves upon. So this isn't just about screen size or even getting the latest technology, because this does sport Intel's Haswell processor line across all of the configured, both pre-configured as well as customizable models. But it also has refinements and just a lot more polish than the original Duo 11 had. But before I get into that, let's talk about the actual configuration I'll be looking at today, sharing, as well as price points. So let me flip the box over. And by the way, one of the first things I want to point out is that even though this is now a 13.3-inch model, I should say, it's just about the same weight as the original, and I think that is significant to say the least. But let's go ahead and start out. Again, an i7 configuration, 4500U is the processor, 1.8 gigahertz. You've got, I will stand corrected, the Intel HD Graphics 4400 unit under the hood, which is very competent. Sony does sell a higher-end configuration that has a bump up in the i7 processor, as well as, I think, a bump up to the 5000 chipset. So for those of you looking for even more performance, that is available. The same 13.3-inch 1920 by 1080 display is what you're going to find across all of the units, whether you go with the lowest end configuration or a configuration like this, which is priced at a little under $1,900 retail. Of course, if you are eligible, you can use Sony's EDU discount, which entitles you to a 10% break. Beyond that, 8 gigs of RAM, of which a portion are soldered on board, much like the original Duo 11. So don't think you're going to be upgrading anything inside of this. This is built to stay internalized. This is not a unit for those of you looking to modify things, although, of course, there will always be some of you out there that will want to do that and may even succeed. Beyond that, this does come with Windows 8 Pro and also a 256 gigabyte solid-state hard drive. That's another option that will make a very big difference in the pricing among the different configurations for the Duo 13, much like the Duo 11. You can go with a base model with 128, or step up to this 256, or if you really want to break out the bills, you can go up to the 512. But I can tell most of you right now the 512 simply isn't worth the price difference, in my opinion, much like the original Duo 11. Now, when the original Duo 11 launched, they originally came in at a low price, bumped it up by $100 pretty much on every configuration once they realized it was extraordinarily popular. And that pricing bump up has translated again here in the 13. As I mentioned, this is a $1,900 model, and yes, it does have a larger screen. You no longer need the sheet battery that the Duo 11 had, but starting out at $1,900 versus the original $1,600 roughly that the similarly configured non-Haswell, of course, Duo 11 model, it does, again, speak to the fact that Sony's acknowledging they've made a good product, the market's received it well, and they expect people to line up and pay extraordinarily high prices. And again, the one thing I will focus on is that you're not going to find anything like this computer, hybrid, tablet, machine on the market right now. So with that said, I think I've given all of you enough information about pricing, specifications. You also have NFC. I'm going to go around the ports as I get this out of the box. So for those of you who have been patiently waiting to see this thing out in the open, even though it's been on the market for roughly a month, let's get it out of the box. So as you can see, right here we've got the 13.3-inch Duo 13, and again, one of the first things I want to point out, just taking it out of the packaging, is that the weight is almost identical to that of the Duo 11. So that, first and foremost, is a very big upgrade for many of you out there. And I know a lot of people would shy away from the Duo 11 simply because of the screen size. 11.6 inches is very close to a tablet, which for people looking for a hybrid experience may have been perfect. But for those of you who really wanted to be able to replace an actual laptop, 13.3 is sort of a sweet spot, at least in the marketplace overall. So let me get this out of the plastic. Not a lot of plastic here as I bump around. Get that out of the way. And design cues are very different. Still a glossy display, but also still, as I mentioned, a very high-res one at that. IPS-based, triluminous. This is pretty much the same display you'll find across all of Sony's high-end laptops right now. And it does have very good color accuracy from what I've seen, especially if you're dealing with Adobe. Anything over around, I believe, roughly 94%, you're going to be happy with what you're going to see out of this display if you're a photographer or someone who's doing any kind of editing or graphic design work. That's really who the Duo series is targeted at because of its digitizer, which is something I'll get to through the course of this video. The things that are similar to the Duo 11, well, you've got that Windows button right at the bottom center. You've also got webcams. Right up here at the top, you've got a 2-megapixel front-facing webcam. There's also an 8-megapixel camera on the back. You can see it's a very thin machine. We're still looking at something that's literally under an inch all around, which is really impressive. Let me get the box out of the way so that you can actually see some of this, because it is a rather large laptop when compared to something like the Duo 11. Don't worry, I will revisit the packaging for those of you really curious about the balance of what's in there, but I do want to go through the actual machine. So again, going through the sides of the machine, you can see this is the thinnest part of the machine right here at the front end. It also accommodates the speaker grill, which has been relocated. You've got your volume buttons as well as your assist button, which if you're a Sony user, then you already know what that's about. And really, this is part of what I'm talking about with the redesign of the entire Duo line here for the larger model. It really does have the polish and the full finished feel that I think a lot of users felt was missing from the Duo 11. The Duo 11 was more of a proof of concept. Here we've got a very well finished product, which I think is part of the difference. And that's not to say that I didn't think that the Duo 11 was finished, because after all, as I said already, it was one of my favorite machines on the market, and still is. Your NFC point for contact is right here at the back. Still not the most convenient in the world, not my favorite, but good to see it. There aren't many machines that do incorporate it. This is slowly becoming a standard, and since NFC is really a useful thing to have for quick transfer of all sorts of different content, good to see that it's here. You've got some rubber feet, the 8-megapixel webcam right there on the back. I shouldn't really call it a webcam because we are now finally approaching a quality that's comparable to what you would find on smartphones. That's another good thing about this tablet laptop hybrid. You are getting one of the best integrated cameras on the market. Ventilation on the left and right side right here. You can also see right here on the right-hand side of the machine, we have the actual pen holder as well as palette. It has two different modes so that you can actually accommodate the pen as well as stand it up when it's in use. And that's important because the Duo 11 had nowhere to put the pen. So a clear correction of something missing from the original generation. And that's why I keep speaking to the polish that this model has. Very solidly made in Japan. All of the ports now, interestingly enough, have been moved to the back side of the machine. So you can see starting over here at the right-hand side, we've got our power port, if I can bring it into focus. Trying my best here. Doesn't seem to want to cooperate, but that's about as good as I'm going to be able to do. We've got the power port, followed by a headphone jack, two USB 3.0 ports, which one of you can be used, like all current Ultrabooks, to charge devices. You've got an HDMI out right there, and then our SD card slot on the left-hand side. All of this, of course, again, flanked to a degree by ventilation. This machine has a lot of ventilation going on, and it needs it. The Duo series has expanded, but in doing so, as I keep mentioning, just everything has become more refined, more polished. On the left-hand side of the machine, you might be able to see, if it comes into focus rather than my arm, is the power button. Trying to get an angle here for you guys to see it, and you should be able to make it out right about there. So the power button, also a complete redesign, so a deviation on just about everything that Sony had done with the Duo 11. The only thing this really shares in common is the actual function of the screen popping up, which I'm going to demonstrate right now. So basically, I'll start off on a side view, because one of the big complaints people had, you can see how easily that popped up, was that when you were actually in that fixed mode, there was quite a bit of cable protrusion, we will say. The ribbons for the display were actually exposed, and they're still there, but things have been tightened up, neatened up, whatever you'd like to say. It's just a much cleaner finish now on the back side. So when comparing it to the Duo 11, again, this product just speaks more to a refined, more polished overall design, a lot more ergonomics taken into account, and just overall usability clearly going to be better here. Not only just because you have a larger screen, I also mentioned the battery is much larger. You're going to get up to 10 hours of use, at least that's what Sony is claiming. Same design with the screen latching in or hooking into two latches here, and that's pretty much how it's going to stay in place. So for those of you who weren't pleased with the fact that you had a fixed viewing angle on the last design, the same thing is still going on here. But I think the overall experience, because of the breadth, the size of this display, as well as keyboard, and no longer needing that additional modular battery, which wasn't an option, but an expensive one. And this is clearly, the price is built in, as I mentioned. Things are more expensive now, but you're getting quite a bit more. And not only in that you've got the bigger screen and battery life and refresh on specifications, but also usability. You can see we now also have a touchpad, something that did not exist. It does promise multi-touch support. I'm not expecting incredible things, though. After all, this is really all about that 13.3-inch high-definition IPS triluminous display. And that's where all of the touching really happens, or at least should, as bizarre as that sounds. 10 points of multi-touch on this display. Really looking forward to using this keyboard as opposed to the Duo 11, simply because that was probably my biggest complaint about the Duo 11. The keyboard size left quite a bit to be desired, especially for those of you that do have large hands. This machine clearly overall a winner when it comes to usability compared to it just because of its size. And again, I'm going to point out that we're only gaining about 1/4 of a pound, maybe even less, I believe it's less than that, in order to accommodate all of this extra space in terms of battery, screen size, and keyboard. So all winning things, in my opinion, a winning combination for the overall package, and still under an inch thick. So Sony's kept it light. We're under 3 pounds, 10 hours of usage, a nice Core i7 configuration here, but yes, extremely pricey. You've got some handles here to actually hold the machine. They've just put a lot more thought into the overall layout. Let me see if I can boot this up and show you the actual display. I'll go back into the actual tablet mode. And I think that's still going to be one of the biggest criticisms of this machine, is that you've only got 2 ways to use it. But for many, there's absolutely no problem. In my opinion, the Duo 11 was perfectly fine at its fixed viewing angle, and I feel the same way about the 13.3. In fact, I feel the 13.3 is just an improvement in every single way. Again, pricing is not one of them, but you can look at it as value added when compared to the roster of things you'd have to buy. The battery was $150 for the Duo 11. And I know for many, as I mentioned earlier, just the screen size alone and keyboard size negated the entire conceptual value of the machine. That's something that isn't lost here. I'm not going to go through this right now because there's going to be quite a bit of updating. Some Sony bloatware is to be expected. I will give you guys a follow-up on it, of course, but that should give you a pretty good idea of what the machine looks like. Again, handling, very nice, solidly made. Construction is what you'd expect from Sony, especially at this price point. Let me bring back the box so you guys can see the balance of included accessories. Because as I mentioned, there is a pen, much like the Duo 11, and we also have a power brick, you know, the usual things we would expect to find. Of course, much like the Duo 11, Sony giving direct instructions on how to lift the screen. That was problematic for some users on the Duo 11 version. So Sony has made it easier to open. I can tell you that in advance, even though I personally didn't have any problems actually opening it. But some people would approach it incorrectly and try to lift it from the sides rather than the back end, and I imagine they ended up with some broken units just because of the way people open them. So we've got a power brick right here, pretty much standard fare for Sony's current lineup of laptops. It also includes, as you may have noticed, a USB port, so you can charge another peripheral like your smartphone while charging your laptop. Just further charging capability even beyond the USB 3.0 port that's on board that will allow you to charge. And then, of course, this is what connects to the wall. In terms of other things, it looks like we are clear on the other compartment. Let me get to what's underneath. So here we've got what I believe is an RGB out connector, so HDMI on one end, and then the ability to hook this up to a projection unit, traditional monitor that does not support HDMI. Basically, really for business projection use is what that will be ideal for. You've got a, let's see what this is. I believe it has to do with the pen, but I could be wrong. I'm not even sure what this cap is. Oh, this is, I do know what this is, excuse me, as this flap keeps trying to get in my way. This is your pen holder. So essentially, this is going to attach to the side of the machine where I was pointing out during the unboxing, and that's going to allow you to clip the pen onto the Duo 13. And that's important because, as I mentioned, the Duo 11 simply had no way to accommodate the pen unless you picked up the extended battery sheet, which did have a pen holder, or decided to purchase the carry case, which had a pen holder. The pen has changed as well. They do include an additional tip, and you've got the standard quadruple A battery, but a little bit of a redesign on the pen, much like everything I've mentioned thus far, more polish here and a more refined product, which should yield a more usable pen. And that's not to say that the n-trig pen that came originally, that was used, was bad, but this is an improvement from what I've seen and experienced so far. So it has a clip, as you may have noticed, and that's exactly how it clips on to that plastic piece that I just was showing all of you. And then finally, we've got our obligatory paperwork. That's the last thing that's included, which basically just introduces all of you to Windows 8. Again, this does come with the Pro version. That's going to depend on your configuration. Now, do keep in mind, if you pick this up through Sony and use the EDU discount, the EDU discount does not apply to custom configurations. So if you plan on, that 10% factoring into things, you're going to want to go with a pre-configured system like the one I just shared with all of you. But that pretty much covers it. This is really right now unmatched in the marketplace. One of the reasons that I'm sharing it with all of you, I do believe that it's one of the best machines on the market, much like the Duo 11. Key differences, as I've mentioned, are all just a much more polished experience, head to toe, and far better usability, or at least the promise of that. As I spend more time with it, of course, I will be updating all of you. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.